May 3, 2007. A family is on vacation at a resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal. They have a routine they follow each evening. Dinner at the resort's tapas restaurant. Young children sleeping in the apartment nearby. Parents taking turns checking on the children throughout the evening. Multiple couples doing the same thing. A familiar pattern repeated each night of the vacation, until this night. This is the night when a young girl disappears from apartment 5A. And the timeline of what happened that evening, the sequence of events, the timing of checks, the movements of various people, none of it adds up the way it should. For 18 years, investigators, journalists, and countless analysts have tried to piece together exactly what happened during a specific window of time that evening. Approximately 90 minutes. From when the girl was last confirmed to be in the apartment to when the alarm was raised that she was missing. 90 minutes, that should be straightforward. Should have clear documentation from multiple witnesses who were there. Should align consistently across all accounts. But it doesn't. Statements contradict each other. Timings shift. Key details change between different retellings. The more closely you examine the timeline, the less sense it makes. This isn't about theories. This isn't about speculation. This is about documented statements given to police. About inconsistencies in those statements that have been identified by investigators. About a timeline that contains gaps, contradictions, and unexplained elements that remain unresolved 18 years later. The timeline matters because if we can't establish exactly what happened when, we can't determine what was physically possible, what the window of opportunity was, or what sequence of events occurred. And after 18 years, that timeline is still disputed. Before we go any further, I need to know something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments. This case has been followed globally for 18 years. I want to see how many people are still trying to understand what happened that night. And if you believe that timeline analysis matters in investigations, that inconsistencies in witness statements deserve examination, that understanding the sequence of events is crucial to understanding what happened, subscribe to Cold Case right now. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and smash that like button because it pushes this story to more people who need to hear it. We specialize in cases where analyzing the evidence reveals questions that remain unanswered, where examining documented facts shows inconsistencies that matter. This case has a timeline problem. Multiple witness statements that should align, but don't. A sequence of events that changes depending on who's describing it and when. And understanding those inconsistencies is crucial to understanding what happened during those 90 minutes. Now let's dive into what the timeline was supposed to be, what the statements actually say, where the inconsistencies are, and why 18 years later we still can't definitively say what happened when. Understanding the timeline requires understanding the routine. The family was on vacation with friends, multiple couples, multiple children. They had established a pattern during the vacation. Parents would have dinner together at the resort's tapas restaurant. Children would be put to bed in their respective apartments. Parents would take turns checking on the children throughout dinner. Walk back to the apartment. Look in on the children. Return to dinner. Repeat every 20 to 30 minutes. This was the routine. This is what they said they were doing that evening. The restaurant was approximately 50 to 75 meters from apartment 5A, depending on the route taken. Less than a 2-minute walk. Close enough that parents felt comfortable leaving children sleeping while they ate dinner nearby. Close enough to check frequently. This proximity is important because it affects how long checks should take and how many could feasibly occur during dinner. The timeline that evening officially begins around 8:30 p.m. That's when the family left their apartment and went to the tapas restaurant for dinner. The young girl and her siblings were asleep in the apartment. The parents joined their friends at the restaurant. According to statements, the first check occurred around 9 p.m., approximately 30 minutes after arriving at dinner. The father went to check on the children. According to his statement, he entered the apartment, checked on the children. All were sleeping. He returned to dinner. This check is documented in statements. What happened during this check would later become significant. At approximately 9:05 p.m., another person from the group also checked on their own children in a different apartment. This person walked past apartment 5A on the way. According to their statement, they noticed the door to 5A was slightly more open than it had been. Not fully open, but ajar. This observation was mentioned in their statement. Whether this detail is significant depends on whether the door had been left that way or if someone had opened it between 9 p.m. and 9:05. At approximately 9:15 p.m., another member of the group went to check on their children. This person's apartment was next to 5A. According to their statement, they listened at the door of 5A as they passed, heard no crying or disturbance, continued to their own apartment, checked their children, returned to dinner. This listening check is documented. The person did not enter apartment 5A, did not visually confirm the children were there, just listened from outside. At approximately 9:30 p.m., the mother went to check on the children. According to her statement, she entered the apartment, went to the children's bedroom, noticed the door was more open than she had left it, noticed the window was open and the shutter was up, noticed the young girl was gone. Immediately rushed back to the restaurant, raised the alarm. This is when the disappearance was discovered. Approximately 10 p.m. or shortly before. That's the official timeline. 8:30 departure for dinner. 9 p.m. check by father. 9:15 listening check. 9:30 discovery by mother. Clear, straightforward. Except when you examine the actual statements given to police, and when you look at subsequent retellings, the timeline becomes considerably less clear. Quick question before we continue. What time is it where you are right now? Let us know in the comments. I'm curious how many people are watching this late at night, trying to understand a timeline that's been confusing investigators for 18 years. Let me break down where the timeline problems begin. First problem, the 9 p.m. check. According to the father's initial statement, he entered the apartment at approximately 9 p.m., went to the children's bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. He looked in, saw all 3 children sleeping. He did not enter the room fully, just looked from the doorway, confirmed they were there, returned to dinner. Time elapsed for this check, approximately 5 minutes total. Walk there, check. Walk back. But in later interviews, details of this check changed. In some accounts, he said he entered the children's bedroom. In others, he said he only looked from the doorway. In some accounts, he mentioned using the bathroom during this check. In others, no mention of that. The route taken to the apartment also varies in different retellings. These aren't major contradictions, but they're inconsistencies, small details that shift. For a check that occurred 90 minutes before the discovery, these details matter because they affect how long he was in the apartment and what he actually observed. Here's where it gets significant. During that 9 p.m. check, the father stated he saw the children's bedroom door ajar, approximately 45 degrees open. He looked in, saw the children, did not close the door, left it as it was. This is important because of what happens later. But there's a problem. If the door was 45 degrees open at 9 p.m., and if no one else entered the apartment between 9 p.m. and 9:30, why would the mother notice the door being more open when she arrived at 9:30? If it was already open at 9 p.m., what changed? Second problem, the 9:15 listening check. Another member of the group walked past apartment 5A at approximately 9:15, listened at the door, heard nothing concerning, did not enter, did not visually check. This listening check has been questioned because it means there was no visual confirmation the children were actually in the apartment between 9 p.m. and 9:30. A 30-minute window where the apartment was not entered and the children were not seen. This matters because it expands the potential window of opportunity. But there's another problem with the 9:15 check. The person who performed this check initially stated they thought they checked around 9:15. In later statements and interviews, the time became less certain, maybe 9:10, maybe 9:20. The uncertainty about timing creates a problem because if we don't know exactly when this check occurred, we can't accurately establish the timeline of the critical window. Third problem, the 9:30 discovery. According to the mother's statement, she went to check on the children at approximately 9:30. She entered the apartment through the patio doors, which had been left unlocked for checking purposes. She went to the children's bedroom. She noticed immediately that something was wrong. The bedroom door was much more open than it should have been. Fully open. She noticed the window was open. The shutter was raised. She looked at the beds and saw that the young girl was gone. She checked quickly. Not in the bed, not in the room. She ran back to the restaurant to raise the alarm. This discovery moment is described consistently across statements, but timing is where problems emerge. The mother stated she checked at 9:30. Other witnesses at the restaurant have different recollections of when she left the table to check. Some say 9:25, some say 9:35. Some say they weren't paying attention to the exact time. The alarm was raised at approximately 10 p.m. according to resort staff who were called. But if the discovery happened at 9:30, why was the alarm raised to staff 30 minutes later? What happened during those 30 minutes? The answer, according to statements, is that time was spent searching. The father and other members of the group immediately began searching the apartment, the surrounding area, asking other guests if they'd seen the girl. But 30 minutes is a significant amount of time. And exactly how that 30 minutes was spent, who went where, who did what, this becomes unclear when you examine different statements. If you're finding this valuable, if you're learning things about timeline analysis that you didn't know before, hit that like button. Every like tells YouTube's algorithm that this story matters, that people still want to understand what happened 18 years ago, that timeline inconsistencies deserve examination. Your engagement helps us bring attention to cases where the documented facts raise questions. So like, comment, share. Now let's talk about the specific timeline inconsistencies that investigators identified. First major inconsistency, the door position. The father stated the children's bedroom door was ajar at 9 p.m., approximately 45 degrees open. He left it that way. The mother stated that at 9:30, the door was fully open, much more open than it should have been. This was one of the first things she noticed that indicated something was wrong. If the father left the door 45 degrees open at 9 p.m. and the mother found it fully open at 9:30, someone opened it further during that 30-minute window. Who? When? Why? The logical explanation would be that whoever took the girl opened the door further. But this creates a timing problem. If the person entered the apartment, went to the bedroom, opened the door wider, took the girl, and left through the window, all of this had to occur after 9 p.m. and before 9:30. But there's a complication: the 9:15 listening check. If someone was in the apartment between 9 p.m. and 9:15 taking a child, would there have been noise? Would the person doing the listening check have heard something? The defense of the listening check is that it was brief. The person stood outside, listened for crying or disturbance, heard nothing, moved on. If the girl was taken quietly, if she didn't cry out, if whoever took her did so silently, the listening check might not have detected anything. But this requires assuming that a young child was taken from her bed by a stranger without making any noise that would be heard from outside the apartment door. Possible, but requires specific circumstances. Second major inconsistency, the window and shutter. The mother stated that when she entered the bedroom at 9:30, the window was open and the shutter was up. The shutter being up is significant because it couldn't be opened from outside. It had to be opened from inside. If the shutter was up, someone inside the apartment had opened it. But there's a problem. The father made his check at 9 p.m. According to his statement, he did not notice the window being open or the shutter being up. If it was closed at 9 p.m. and open at 9:30, someone opened it during that 30-minute window. The logical conclusion is that whoever took the girl opened the window and shutter as an exit point. But this creates questions. Why would someone take the time to open a window and shutter when they could exit through the patio doors, which were unlocked? Opening the shutter makes noise. It's visible from outside. It draws attention. Why take that risk? And if the window was the exit point, why wasn't there physical evidence of someone climbing through it with a child? Third major inconsistency, the jemmied shutter. In early statements and media reports, there were claims that the shutter appeared to have been forced or jemmied from outside. This would support the theory that an intruder broke in. But when forensic examiners inspected the shutter, they found no evidence of forced entry, no tool marks, no damage consistent with being forced. The shutter had been opened normally from inside. This contradicts the early narrative of a break-in. If the shutter wasn't forced, how did it get opened? Who opened it from inside? Fourth major inconsistency: timing of the checks. The stated timeline is 9 p.m. check by father, 9:15 listening check, 9:30 discovery by mother. But when investigators examined cell phone records, restaurant bills, and other time-stamped evidence, questions emerged about whether these times were accurate. Cell phone activity didn't align perfectly with stated check times. Restaurant service timing didn't match exactly with when people said they left and returned. These aren't major discrepancies, but they suggest the times given in statements might not be precise. This matters because if the actual timeline is different from the stated timeline by even 5 or 10 minutes, it changes the window of opportunity. If the father's check was actually at 8:55 instead of 9 p.m., and the mother's discovery was actually at 9:20 instead of 9:30, the window shrinks from 30 minutes to 25. If it expands in the other direction, the window is larger. Without precise timing, we can't know exactly how much opportunity existed. Fifth major inconsistency: what the father actually saw at 9 p.m. According to his statement, he looked into the children's bedroom, saw the children sleeping, all 3 of them. He specifically confirmed seeing the young girl. But here's the problem. The bedroom lighting was very low. There was a dim night light. The children were under covers. The father looked from the doorway. In those conditions, could he have definitively confirmed all 3 children were in their beds, or did he see shapes that he assumed were the children? This question matters because if the father couldn't actually confirm seeing the girl at 9 p.m., only assumed she was there because he saw a shape in the bed, then she could have been taken before 9 p.m. The window of opportunity expands backward. It could have occurred between 8:30 when the family left for dinner and 9 p.m. when the father checked. This would be a 45-minute window instead of 30. But if she was taken before 9 p.m., the listening check at 9:15 wouldn't have detected anything because she was already gone. The mother's discovery at 9:30 would be discovering something that happened up to an hour earlier. This changes the entire timeline of the investigation, changes what they should have been looking for, changes the potential suspect pool. Let me break down why these timeline inconsistencies matter from an investigative standpoint. First, they affect the window of opportunity. If we don't know exactly when the girl was last confirmed to be in the apartment and exactly when her absence was discovered, we can't determine how much time the perpetrator had. 30 minutes? 45 minutes? An hour? Each possibility requires different assumptions about how the crime occurred and who could have committed it. Second, inconsistencies affect credibility of statements. When details shift between retellings, investigators have to determine whether those shifts represent honest memory errors or deliberate changes to the story. For the 9 p.m. check, the changing details about entering the room versus looking from the doorway, using the bathroom or not, these could be memory errors under stress, or they could indicate the check didn't happen exactly as described. Without knowing which, investigators can't fully rely on that statement. Third, inconsistencies create investigative rabbit holes. If investigators spend months pursuing leads based on a 9 p.m. to 9:30 window, but the actual window was different, they've wasted resources and time chasing the wrong timeline. Early decisions about where to search, who to interview, what to look for, all based on timeline assumptions. If those assumptions are wrong, the investigation starts off in the wrong direction. Fourth, inconsistencies enable alternative theories. When the official timeline has gaps and contradictions, it creates space for alternative explanations, some based on evidence, some based on speculation, but all enabled by the fact that the basic timeline can't be definitively established. If the timeline was clear and consistent, many alternative theories would be impossible. But because it's not, the door stays open to multiple interpretations. Before we wrap up, I want to know something. Do you think the timeline inconsistencies are significant? Do they indicate problems with the investigation, or are they just normal memory errors under extraordinary stress? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This has been debated for 18 years. I want to see what people think. Now let's talk about what these timeline problems mean for the investigation and for efforts to understand what happened. The fundamental issue is that without a clear, consistent timeline, it's difficult to determine what was physically possible. If the window is 30 minutes, certain scenarios become unlikely because there isn't enough time. If the window is 60 minutes, more becomes possible. If we can't establish the window, we can't eliminate scenarios based on timing. The timeline problems also affect suspect identification. Early investigation focused on people who could have accessed the apartment during the assumed 30-minute window, narrowed the suspect pool based on who was where when. But if the timeline is wrong, the suspect pool might be wrong too. Someone who has an alibi for 9 p.m. to 9:30 might not have an alibi for 8:45 to 9:15. Timing matters for eliminating or including suspects. For 18 years, these timeline questions have remained. Statements have been re-examined. Witnesses have been re-interviewed. Efforts have been made to establish a definitive sequence of events. But fundamental inconsistencies remain. The door that was ajar but then fully open. The window that was closed but then open. The checks that happened at times that don't align perfectly with other evidence. The discovery that somehow took 30 minutes to result in an official alarm being raised. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are documented problems in the case file. Questions that investigators themselves have identified. Inconsistencies that official reports acknowledge. For a case this significant, investigated this thoroughly by this many different agencies over 18 years, the fact that the basic timeline still contains unresolved contradictions is remarkable. It suggests that either the events of that evening were more complex than the official timeline suggests, or that the statements given don't fully capture what actually happened. Understanding the timeline matters because it's foundational. Before you can investigate how something happened, you need to know when it happened. Before you can identify who could have done something, you need to know what the window of opportunity was. Before you can evaluate theories, you need a factual baseline of the sequence of events. And 18 years later, that baseline still has cracks in it. The 90 minutes from 8:30 p.m. when the family went to dinner to 10 p.m. when the alarm was officially raised should be the best documented period of that evening. Multiple witnesses, frequent checks, close proximity. Everything should align, but it doesn't. And until someone can explain why the door position changed, why the window state changed, why the timing doesn't match across all statements, why 30 minutes elapsed between discovery and alarm, the timeline will remain a problem at the heart of this case. In memory of a young girl who disappeared from apartment 5A on May 3, 2007. After 18 years, the timeline of what happened that evening still contains questions that deserve answers. Understanding when events occurred is crucial to understanding what happened, and that understanding remains incomplete. If this timeline analysis was valuable to you, if you learned things about the case you didn't know before, if you believe that examining documented inconsistencies matters, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Cold Case. We examine cases where the documented facts raise questions, where analyzing the evidence reveals problems that need addressing, where timeline matters. Leave a comment with your thoughts about the timeline inconsistencies. Do they indicate something significant? Or are they just the natural result of stressful situations and imperfect memory? What other cases have timeline problems that affected the investigation? Share this with anyone who follows this case, anyone interested in investigative analysis, anyone who believes that getting the basic facts right matters in any investigation. The timeline is supposed to be the foundation. When the foundation has cracks, everything built on it becomes questionable. And after 18 years, those cracks are still there.